Alright, everyone, it's time to do my top 10 favorite horror movies from 1978, the year of John Carpenter movies, made for TV films, and part twos. Got a few of those this year, and so I watched about 32 movies for this ranking, and a lot of them were first time watches, a few surprises here and there, some of them mainly thriller than horror. And yeah, so this is going to be kind of a controversial list because my taste is not going to be the same as yours. In case you don't know the format here, I also do, outside of my top 10, I do 3 honorable mentions and 3 dishonorable mentions, and then I also do some shoutouts for other movies that couldn't make the list. So, let's start with the 3 dishonorable mentions. First one up, the one I just hated the most watching this month, and that is The Last House on the Beach. This movie gets 1 star from me just because of the last 10 minutes that has a very death-proof Tarantino ending. Outside of that, the rest of this movie can suck my dick. This is a dreadful 90-minute long rape revenge, Last House on the Left wannabe film. Look at the title of the film. It wants to be like that movie, but the rape revenge shit doesn't kick in until the 80-minute mark, and it's not even satisfying. The dialogue is horrible, and the music is like bad 70s porn music and like adventure movie music at times. And these victims don't have any development whatsoever. You don't know who any of them are when the home invasion shit starts. You wonder how these antagonists even know these girls' names because you don't even know their names. The editing in this movie is really jarring at times. They'll just replay sequences again in slow-mo right after it happened. Like, hey, in case you weren't watching the movie the last 15 seconds, here it is again in slow-mo. Next dishonorable mention will be a movie called Cyclone. Robotic ADR acting and Italian red blood and no engaging characters plus a 2-hour runtime equals absolute misery. I couldn't pay attention to this movie for more than a few minutes at a time. It was just so god-awful boring with just awful Italian music that just did not fit. There's man-eating sharks in the movie that are eating clearly just packaged meat. It's not even the humans in the movie. The only thing that was memorable about this movie was the fact that they slit a live dog's throat on camera. Obviously, it wasn't real, but that was the most brutal scene in the movie. Final dishonorable mention will go to a movie with Richard Crenna, and that's called Devil Dog, Hound of Hell. I'll sum up this movie in one word: generic. You've seen this kind of movie 1,000 times before and since. This made-for-TV movie gets going so fast you have no time to actually get invested in the main family, who all instantly just get possessed by the dog, and except for the dad for plot convenience sake. For some reason, the dog in this movie, after killing the Latina housekeeper, on day 1 when it gets there, it decides to wait a whole year before abusing its satanic powers and mind controlling the whole family except for the dad. The story is just so predictable and it takes zero risk. The look of the devil dog towards the end of that pathetic climax and the visual effects within are horrid and laughable. The only good thing about this movie is Richard Crenna's performance. Alright, now before we jump into my actual top 10, let's go over some movies that were okay that just, couldn't make my list. So, shout outs to these. The Grapes of Death. A young woman discovers that the pesticide being sprayed on vineyards is turning people into murderous lunatics. The Comeback. A singer holds up at a sinister estate to write new songs for his act. The ghost of his murdered wife begins to haunt him, then the person who actually killed her shows up to the mansion. The Redeemer, son of Satan. 6 people are trapped within the confines of their old high school during their 10-year high school reunion with a psychotic masked preacher who kills them off for their sinful lives. The Toolbox Murders. No one is safe when a killer wielding the deadly contents of his toolbox methodically stalks his prey. The Medusa Tush. A French detective in London reconstructs the life of a man lying in hospital with severe injuries with the help of journals and a psychiatrist. He realizes that the man had powerful telekinetic abilities. Patrick. A comatose hospital patient harasses and kills, though also uses his powers of telekinesis to claim his private nurse as his own. And lastly, It's Alive Part 2, It Lives Again. An epidemic of mutant monster babies sweeps America. Alright, now let's jump into my top 10. So, number 10 will go to a sequel to the Omen, and that is the Omen II Damian. This is a kind of slow moving, dialogue heavy sequel that feels too been here, done that, kind of borrowing a lot of familiar story beats as the original, and even ends the same way. The death scenes in this movie are a lot more graphic and elaborate than part one, which I like. I like that Jerry Goldsmith does the composing for this movie as well. He brings over his ominous, really unsettling score from the first one into this movie. And I also noticed on this watch that the color red seems to be present in every death scene in some way. It's always on the victim's clothing or the Bible they hold. Look for the color red on each victim the next time you watch this movie. Number 9 goes to Day of the Woman, aka I Spit on Your Grave. One of the first and most popular rape revenge movies, if not the birth of the genre as we know it. Now, the rape in this movie is very hard to get through, lasting over 30 minutes of her just getting attacked again and again. It's quite brutal, but then you get that cathartic third act where she fucks them up one by one. It's not like the remakes, though. It doesn't really go for gore and effects. It almost has no blood or effects. It's more like in your mind when she cuts off the guy's dick, and you do have to suspend disbelief when she starts somehow hanging the guy, pulling him up on her own. Number 8 will go to a movie written by John Carpenter, and that is The Eyes of Laura Mars. This is a murder mystery about a woman who inexplicably can see murder as it is happening, blinding her in the moment. This has a lot of drop-dead gorgeous ladies and plenty of nudity. This movie has a really good cast starring Tommy Lee Jones and the wonderful Brad Dourif, who both give really good performances, and the characters overall are pretty good. The mystery offers a few red herrings, keeping you engaged with the story. There's only a few kind of stagnant, slow moments in the movie. I thought the music was really suspenseful, and I like how the movie kind of opens up like Halloween with POV, the killer stalking a girl in the house coming in from outside. It felt very much like the opening of Halloween. Even though I really like the mystery, what kind of holds this movie back is the way it wraps up at the end. I thought the climax was just not satisfying to me. There was no real struggle. It's just the killer revealing themselves, giving a quick generic motivation, and then it's over. Number 7, we'll go to a Brian De Palma film, and that is The Fury. This is kind of like Brian De Palma's unofficial sequel to Carrie with Kirk Douglas and Amy Irving. This is another well-shot Brian De Palma film with his style and a familiar cast of great actors and a terrific score by John Williams that kind of echoes similar cues that you will later hear in Indiana Jones. I love the finale of this movie. It's like Scanners, but with an explosive twist. And I love that this movie has one of those tropes in like action movies where something blows up and they show it from like 50 different angles, or like 100 times each. This thing just keeps blowing up again and again and again. And you're like, Jesus, I get it. I thought the actor who played Robin in the movie was the weakest actor, clearly, as I was watching it. And I just didn't like how his story with his father ultimately wrapped up. Also, this movie barely feels like a horror movie. There's not a whole lot of suspense or as many cool like telekinetic effects going on throughout the movie to keep me interested. It felt more like a sci-fi movie, which I'm not usually big on, but still a very well made movie, one worth checking out, just not one that I can see myself revisiting time and time again. Number 6 will go to one of the first Jaws ripoffs, and that is Piranha. This is Joe Dante's film debut and very much feels like a Dante film. I love the title card, and Pino Donaggio's score is great. And I love that this movie actually attacks kids, and I think kills some kids at this summer camp. They all become victim to the piranhas. No one is safe. I could be wrong, but I think this movie's PG, which is shocking if that's true, because there's a good amount of blood and some gory effects here and there, and a high body count. I also really liked the humor in the movie. It was well balanced with the horror, didn't go too over the top, slapsticky with the comedy. You got Dick Miller and Paul Bartel having cameo roles in here, and they're good comic relief characters, and even the main actress in the movie was a cool, fun, quirky female lead, and I really liked her. There are some like stop motion effects and weird fast forward shots that kind of take you out of the moment, kind of age the film, and there's like this weird creature in this lab towards the beginning that never is brought back into the movie later on. And this movie has one of those moments where some characters like trying to redeem themselves and they have like this sacrificial moment sacrificing their life to save somebody else, but what they ultimately do is nothing. They save nothing, so it just felt pointless. This to me is one of the only good Jaws-inspired rip-offs that actually has some talent behind it and a good production value wrapped around it. Number 5, we'll go to the movie Coma. This movie starts off quite melodramatic and kind of slow, but then turns into a captivating mystery thriller with an outstanding cast. Tom Selleck and Ed Harris had very small roles in this movie. It was cool to see them, and even the killer from Nightmare Beach plays the hitman in this movie. You got another great Jerry Goldsmith score that doesn't even kick in until over 40 minutes into the movie, but when it kicks in, it's effective, it amplifies the tension, and there's plenty of that in this movie. This is a movie with a great, strong female lead who's brave and determined and smart, but I do question one of her decisions towards the end, her putting trust into a specific character where I'm like, why would you trust them at this point? There was even a cool double twist. They kind of fake you out. They make you think this character is betraying them, but then it's like, no, they weren't. So that fooled me. I like that. The electrocution kill, which is like the only like kill in the movie, has this like bad electricity effect on it that just wasn't necessary, and it's the only thing that really ages the movie. And maybe the movie could have done a better job establishing a more deep connection and friendship between the main girl and this other girl who falls into a coma. There wasn't really much between them to show why she would be so determined and passionate to find out what exactly caused the coma. There was only like one short scene between these two characters in the open, and that was really it. So, but outside of that, really enjoyed the movie. I recommend it. Check out Coma. Number 4, we'll go to a John Carpenter movie, and that is Someone's Watching Me. This is a made-for-TV thriller with a fantastic lead character who is sympathetic, strong, and brave. She's got a really strong personality and wit and makes a lot of good decisions in the movie, and she's the reason to watch this. You get familiar John Carpenter movie actors in this, like Charles Cyphers and Adrienne Barbeau, who have kind of small roles in it. The movie really clicks along at a good pace, and the characters make the right decisions and they ask the right questions that you're asking as you watch it. And the dialogue overall, I liked it. It felt genuine. The dialogue was smart, and the love interest didn't feel forced, and I liked him. We never really find out who the killer put on the airplane that one character was supposed to be on, and the fate of that character is kind of ambiguous. Is that person dead? Did they really go on the airplane? That's the only thing that kind of confused me. But the ending of this movie is perfect, wraps up just the way I would have wanted it. Number 3 goes to a remake, and that is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is a riveting sci-fi horror remake with a terrific cast and an iconic bleak ending. It's kind of like The Thing meets Nightmare on Elm Street. If you fall asleep, you die and become an alien born out of a pod. The effects are pretty good, and there's a shockingly gory like face crush effect for a PG rating. And Brooke Adams walks around naked towards the end. I like how the score in the movie kind of evolves throughout the film, changing, using different unsettling sounds. And at the beginning, it kind of sounds like Black Christmas, which Art Hindle from that movie is in this one. Also, the first act of this movie is fantastic. It just kind of cuts to the chase quickly, but it doesn't leave out character development in the process. You really do flesh out these characters and their connection with each other. I really like all of these people. I think all 4 of the main characters are engaging. The camera work in the movie is interesting, kind of artsy, the way the movie's shot, and also kind of puts you as the audience in their shoes and their state of confusion, looking around the city like, what the hell's going on? One of my only gripes with the movie is the dog with the human face. Reminded me of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. It's too silly looking, and the way the people look when they're screeching and pointing, like the facial expressions, the way they sound. It's more laugh-inducing to me than creepy. And shout out to Scotty Boy Rules and Big A Ray. Number 2, we'll go to a movie that is the biggest surprise of this year. I did not expect to like this movie as much as I did, and that is Magic. This movie has an outstanding lead performance by Anthony Hopkins, playing a mentally ill ventriloquist magician who wants to believe that his doll is real. This movie is like a tragic love story and character study that's really captivating and intense. And of course, being the Chucky fan that I am, I liked the puppet in the movie. I thought it was a creepy looking doll. There were some really good eerie shots in the movie of the doll. And once again, you got another Jerry Goldsmith score that's good as usual. My only nitpick with the movie is that at some point the story became obvious where it was going. I knew kind of like how it was ultimately going to wrap up by the end. So I wasn't really surprised by the ending. It went basically exactly where I thought it was going. And I ultimately wish that it would have went a different direction because I felt so sorry for the character of Corky. Now, before we get into my number one, let's go over three quick honorable mentions, movies that just got bumped off the list. And the first one will be an anthology movie called House of the Dead. This is a PG anthology of 4 morality tales with a wraparound at a funeral home with a twist. A twist that you see coming a mile away from the beginning, I might add. The first segment features killer kids and creepy masks, which was kind of interesting and cool, but then it just kind of becomes ruined by the end by the decision to put some weird negative filter over the screen. The second segment is this guy filming all his murders before getting arrested and put on death row. We only get to see 3 of the 6 murders that he was arrested for, so I just wish this segment was longer. And the third segment has these 2 intelligent, egotistical detectives who ultimately end up killing each other, and the whole mystery behind that segment was pretty easy to predict. And then the last segment is this guy who, is middle class and has no respect for homeless people. And then by the end of the segment, after being like psychologically tormented and tortured for God knows how long by God knows who, he ends up basically being homeless by the end, or looking homeless at least. The acting overall was good, and some of the dialogue felt genuine and believable, but there just needed to be more thrills and horror and some more time added to some of these segments. Next honorable mention is the one that's going to get me in trouble for not making my top 10, and that is Romero's Dawn of the Dead. This was a first time watch, and this movie is just not my cup of tea. There's 2 things that make this movie worth watching to me, and that is Ken Foree and Tom Savini in his special effects. I like the final act of the movie. That's when it really starts to pick up and it gets action packed and gory, and Tom Savini shows up, and I really like his character, mainly just because it's Tom Savini. Hey, so I recognize him. That's why I like him, I guess. But everything before that, I just was not into. The Goblin score in this movie is good at times, but then there's other times where it's just dreadful. And in case you're wondering, I watched the 2-hour cut on YouTube, which seems to be the only way I can watch this movie because it's not streaming anywhere else. And while I do like some of the effects in this movie by Tom Savini, some of them look kind of cheap, and the red blood is way too bright red. It's like Italian blood, which I guess makes sense because Argento is the producer of this, I believe. I love the mall location, though. I think that's a smart, cool idea for a zombie movie, and they really do take advantage of that setting in the film. But unfortunately, I just couldn't really get into most of the characters, like the small officer. I just thought he was annoying as hell, and I just couldn't get invested in the pregnant chick and her boyfriend. Like, I just felt nothing for them. Now, I'm not shitting on the movie. I do think it's above average, especially taking its small budget into account. They did some impressive things here, but it's just not my cup of tea. And final honorable mention will be The Evil. This plays out like a really good traditional haunted house movie until the producers unfortunately took a shit on the third act by making them insert some fat greasy guy as Satan in a white suit. This guy had no business playing the devil. He should have just been playing fucking Santa Claus in some other movie. I don't know why they decided to do that, but that's really the only major stain on this film is the third act. It just falls off the rails. But the second act of this movie is great, and that's where all the highlights are really at, is in the middle. You got these characters that actually do try everything they can to escape, and I love that the evil of this house is just toying with them. It could easily kill them because we see how strong this thing is, and it could kill them in an instant, but it's just toying with them and fucking with them and just psychologically messing with them, and I love that. I really dig the setting also. The house, it's grand and atmospheric and just perfect for this kind of film. It's just unfortunate that the story is a bit messy, especially by the end in the finale. Big misfire. And also there's a fire stunt towards the beginning that gives The Burning a run for its money when it comes to showing a very obvious fire stunt suit on a stuntman. Alright, so that's the end of my honorable mentions. Number 1, it's obvious. It's one of the best slasher movies ever made. My favorite John Carpenter movie ever, and that is Halloween. This movie is just perfect to me. It's got an iconic opening, one of the best scores of all time, very recognizable and catchy, just simplistic. The story and just the characters are great. You got, an awesome looking mask on the killer, the long tracking shot in the beginning that they mask the cut so they make it look like it's one shot. Very cool. The pumpkin intro, the atmosphere. I love it. I have a whole review talking about this movie, two reviews really, that you can check out all my thoughts on this movie. So I'm not going to say it all again here. So you can just go check out that review for all my thoughts on this movie. So shout out to a few people, Mikey, T.O. Martin, and P. Merc25, who chose this as their favorite also of 1978. And there you have it. That is my favorite of 1978. Any other movies I watched, I'll put in the description below so you can see what else I watched from 1978. And I look forward to 1977. I have no idea what my favorite movie is going to be. I looked at the list of movies. There's hardly any that I've seen from 1977, except for just like 2 or 3. So I'm curious to see what my number one is next month. So, but what is your number one of 1978? Let me know in the comments below what your top 10 is. Is there anyone else out there like me who's not super high on Dawn of the Dead? Because you ask 9 out of 10 horror fans, and they're going to tell you Dawn of the Dead is a masterpiece. I'm just like, meh. So yeah, my taste is different. I'm probably going to get shit for it, but whatever. Just here to be honest, that's my opinion. So anyways, thank you so much for joining me tonight. If you like what you've seen here, you can hit this like button and become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And remember, it's all an opinion. You don't need to get butthurt about it.